Rabbi Kevin.
Don't you want to dedicate it for Arthur?
Yes, that's good. Sorry, my memory.
You got 6 minutes. That's good. We made it just before Shkia.
All right. So, guys, on a serious note, Arthur, your father's name, wasn't it Sam?
Samuel Mattis Umatatahau Tenowitz.
Yeah, no. Shmuel Matisyahu ben Atur.
Yeah.
I get that, but his English name was Sam, wasn't it, if I remember?
Yeah.
Okay, so talk to us about your dad, because it's important.
Well, he had a famous saying that life was like pulling hen's teeth, because he was a dentist that didn't have teeth.
Okay.
Okay, the applaud goes out there. I can see the laughter. Comedian times out. No, look, my dad and I are very close. It's very different to a lot of people's experience. When I used to go visit my dad, the first thing I'd do, I'd kiss him and give him a hug hello. Then I'd kiss him and give him a hug goodbye. It was always our rule. And we always said the words, I love you, before we left and when we arrived. And when I used to go quite often, we used to walk around the garden holding hands. And we went one time out on a Sunday to a fete. And we walked around holding hands, just like he was my dad, even at 27. Never stopped. So it was a good life. Okay, my parents were divorced, but my parents had a rule that they said to us when they got divorced, that it's not our fault, it's them. And we were allowed to visit our parents at any time. I mean, one time we used to visit my dad. I used to sleep over at my dad. He'd take us to school in the morning, and we'd go to my mother. Spend the day with my mom until 7 o'clock till my dad picked us up. My dad would take us out for supper at 7:30, sleep over my dad, go back to mom the whole time. And then on weekend we chose whether we wanted to go to my mom or my dad. And we were allowed to go eat anyway. There was no restrictions.
Amazing. That alone tells me a big deal about the quality of your parents.
Yeah. No, that's, I mean, I have a lot of people who got divorced, and sadly they use their kids as pawns, yeah, and the kids get messed up. And with us, we never had that problem. It was a different life. They said to us, it's us, not you. Which is very, very important for the kids to do, because kids take it seriously. Yeah.
This is for Shlema, for Shifra Simcha, Bat Yeta, and for all the Cholim of Klal Yisrael, wherever they may be.
Amen.
Okay, the next Malocha is cooking, and we'll also have to divide this amongst two sessions. And cooking is called mevashel in Hebrew, mem bet shin lamed. And there's a couple of prohibitions: cooking, baking, roasting, frying, or any other method of heating a substance. Cooking is a complex melacha, since it doesn't only consist of heating substances on a stove. It also relates to combining certain types of foods of different temperatures. For example, cooking may result by mixing hot water with a tea bag, because one is thereby brewing the tea. Hot is defined as the temperature at which the hand cannot withstand the heat, which is 45 degrees C, 113 degrees Fahrenheit. Warm refers to foods which have fallen in temperature below 45 degrees C, but still possess a noticeable degree of heat. When a hot liquid is poured and comes into contact with the cold sides of another utensil, its temperature will fall, and it will not possess such a strong cooking effect when mixed with cold substances in the second utensil. For this reason, the more a liquid is transferred from its source of heat, the more lenient one may be in mixing it with other substances. For example, one may not add cold water to a pot of hot soup which has been standing on a stove, since the water will become hot and cook. But if the soup is first transferred to a bowl, cold water may be added. So they call that a kli sheni, a second vessel, and the first vessel is called a kli rishon. These, I don't know if they're going to mention it, but that's, so I'll continue with the second part tomorrow.
Excellent. Okay, two more things I want to read before we start the Gemara Shir. The first one, Derech Hashem, in the book translated by Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan. The book was from Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, the Ramchal. We're on page 35, which is chapter 1, section 1, which discusses the fundamentals of the Creator. So among the things that it's also necessary to know is that God must be absolutely one. It's impossible that there exists more than one being whose existence is intrinsically imperative. Only one being can possibly exist with this necessity and the perfect essence. And therefore, the only reason all other things have the possibility of existence is that God wills them to exist. All other things therefore depend on him and do not have intrinsic existence. So we can therefore see that there are 6 basic principles involved in the understanding of God. This is what we've learned so far. The fact of his existence, his perfection, the necessity of his existence, his absolute independence, his simplicity, and his unity. Okay. So what's the difference between simplicity and unity? I just want to ask you guys before we go on. Do you know?
Well, I think somebody else.
What do you mean by
Okay, Gavin, you want to? Okay, I think we all know. Who was Gavin was first?
No, you go for it, Kev. Go for it.
Or Arthur?
You go first, Kev. 2 votes for Kev.
Okay, I want to go. Okay, Kevin, go.
Okay, unity is if everyone is in agreement, joining together. There's no division. There's no problems, basically. Are you talking about generally or in context of what you just read?
In the context of what I've read, Kevin has got a good point, is that unity means there's not a division of authority which would relate to where we read. In other words, if there's achdut, it means everybody's on the same page. In the context here, what it's basically saying is when we refer to God as simplicity, we mean that where human beings need different faculties to be able to achieve a goal, the more components you have, the more likely the breakdown could occur. That's why people get everything from dementia to organ failure, etc., because of the cooperation needed between complex parts, which in fact is a deficiency in and of itself. So what the Ramchal was also saying is, in this world, we're limited by our 5 senses. We cannot imagine anything that works in its absolute simplicity. And in fact, I was thinking about the movie called The Terminator, Terminator 2 with Arnold Schwarzenegger. So how does it relate to the Ramchal? Is that Arnold Schwarzenegger was what you called an older generation robot. He consisted of mechanized parts. And then in the second movie of Terminator, he was against a cyborg that actually was made almost of mercury, that he could shapeshift into absolutely anything. And it was almost impossible to destroy this cyborg unless you threw him in molten lava, where it would actually, the very essence of it would disintegrate. Because there's no components and because it's morphable and changeable, it made it virtually indestructible. So I've just thought that was a good analogy for this. In terms of unity, what it's discussing, and this is a very important principle, is that this is where Rabbi Ziskin told me the story. He said he went to take his car to the mechanic, and the mechanic said to him, well, who do you think will win at the end of the day? Do you think we'd be lucky and God would win, or do you think the devil would win? And I don't know what Rabbi Ziskin answered him. But the thing of it is, one of the biggest problems that you've got with Christianity is there seems to be this apparent struggle between the devil, darkness, and God, which is light. And the problem with that is you're talking about 2 powers trying to vie for the soul of a human being, which is intrinsically a problem, because that's saying that God's having a challenge here. Okay? God's having a challenge against another force. That is idolatry. It's even more despicable than idolatry. The Jewish view of the Satan in Hebrew, Kevin, are you with me? The Satan means obstruction. So what does it mean, obstruction? It means we cannot see God clearly. What happened is after the eating of the fruit of the tree of knowledge, of good and evil is that all of a sudden, why people make mistakes is not that they don't know it's 100% wrong. It's not an excuse, because in the spiritual world, you'll be held accountable. What I'm saying is they don't know what is wrong, is that if I get a piece of hot lava and molten lead, and I told you to stick your hand in it, you would not do so, because you can see you're not going to have a hand. You're going to end up having a serious problem. But when you're doing an Avera, you don't, when you jack up a cigarette on Shabbos, get a lightning bolt up your tuchas. Just doesn't happen. So the thing of it is that allows for free choice, is that if you do commit sins, you can almost, inverted commas, get away with it in this world. In many cases, eventually, if you keep doing it, it's going to catch up with you in this world even. But principally, that has to allow for free choice, because if you did wrong and you got punished immediately, no free choice. So therefore, the illusion of free choice means we don't know what's wrong or right. A lot of it is sometimes guesswork. A lot of it is that our minds play tricks on us. So what has this got to do with the Satan versus God? Is that it's not a competition where you have the Satan vying for souls and God struggling against the Satan. We are struggling between our choices of good and bad, not God. And when the Catholics view it like that, if you heard Christa Berg's song Spanish Train, where their souls on the Spanish train and God's negotiating with the devil, it's a ridiculous Christian theme. Christa Berg's a religious Christian. His daughter's a supermodel. Pretty cool. Anyway, what I was going to say is she must have got the looks from her mother. But that's on a separate note, not from Christa Berg. But the thing of it is, all I'm saying is that the Jewish view is that God has no equal. He's not vying for power struggles to get things done. The Satan is a malach. It's an angel that works for Hashem. Okay? It's the equivalent analogy of a marshal, which you have a servant that works for a king, and his job is to test the king's son to see if the king's son would make a good leader. So he tests him with prostitutes, with drinking, with drugs, with everything. Now, there's the guy that works for the king's son has to do this job, but he's secretly hoping that the heir to the throne is going to be a reputable heir and is going to pass these tests. But his job is to get them to fail. But he works for the king. Hashem is the only king. The Satan is a malach, and you can't hate the Satan or your Yetzer Hara. What you've got to do is respect the fact that the negative forces are doing what they have to do in the world. We need to do what we have to do. So you have a sexual drive in order to have children and get married. You're jealous in order to get you to get up in the morning and do certain things and not sit on your laurels. But everybody works for Hashem. And that's the message I want. Okay, so Gavin brought up a good point. I want to get into the Gemara, but what he's saying is that there's perfect unity when there's perfect simplicity. When there's no components of parts, there's no competition. And it just works cohesively, perfectly. I think that's brilliant. I think it's true. All right, let's start the Gemara. Am I correct, Gav?
Good, exactly
All right,
what I was going to say. Thank you.
All right. I think Gavin said it more eloquently, but you stuck.
No, I think you did. All right, continue.
So listen, the Gemara digresses. It spoke about the Romans that they weren't going to rat and snitch and say Lashon Hara against the Jews about this particular brass. And now the Gemara digresses, and it basically has a completely different discussion, but there's still a link. Because the previous Gemara and the forthcoming one appear to be superficially unconnected. But if you look at it, the Meiri implies there's a connection between them. What's the connection? Well, the previous Gemara spoke of the reward that accrues to a non-Jew who studies Torah. The forthcoming Gemara will lead us to know that God doesn't even hold a reward for a righteous act. I mean, even if you have a look here, is that it said that when the dogs left Egypt, because Hashem muzzled the dogs from making a noise. And this is when Hashem took away their free choice and they couldn't, they couldn't bark, etc. And the frogs that jumped in the oven at one of the plagues ended up outliving those other frogs that didn't almost commit suicide. The bottom line of this sort of theme is that even an animal that does what Hashem expects it to do to help the Jewish people in itself gets certain sort of halachic rewards. Does that make sense? In other words, if certain animals are prohibited to other animals, you can feed them partly to the dogs, etc. So if we even give animals reward for doing certain things, obviously even people get a reward, even if their motive is impure. So there's just something I want to digress on, is that there's levels and levels. The highest level of reward is to serve Hashem. Sometimes if you want to learn Torah from an intellectual point of view, it says you'll come to do it, obviously, l'shem shemaim, once you see the beauty and the truth in it. But if you're doing it initially for an intellectual exercise or for stimulation, you still get the reward for learning Torah. Obviously, the reward is not as high, but motivation is part of the reward, but irrespective, the act itself carries a reward. Fine. So what does the Gemara digress and say? Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda's daughter died. The rabbi said to Ulla, come, let us go and console him. Ulla said to them, what have I to do with the consolation of you Babylonians? Okay, now if you think about it, that's quite a hectic statement. Somebody comes to see you to console you for the loss of your daughter, and you turn around and says, do you think I need the consolement of you rabbis in Babylonia? Sounds a bit harsh. Okay. Why? Ulla lived in Eretz Yisrael, and he would travel regularly to Bavli. Okay, where does it mention this? In Gemara Brochas 9b, 38b, Shabbos 108b. So those are your sources. So he was very critical of Babylonian practices. Where's the proof of it? In Gemara Tanis 9b. So what's Tanis? It deals with fasts like Yom Kippur, etc. So I don't know what he was critical of, but some of their practices he found dubious. So why was he specifically upset about this particular sort of visit? Okay, so if you have a look, I think it was in the way that they consoled him, because when he said, "What do I have to do with the consolation of your Babylonians?" and then he said, "It's blasphemy against the one above. For when they come and console the bereaved, the Babylonians say, what can be done?" So, in other words, they're trying to make the Babylonians make Rav Ulla feel better. So they say to him, well, look, we wish you long life. We're very sorry. What can be done? What do you think the implication of saying that is? Why does he consider it blasphemy?
Is it because they're not accepting the will of Hashem?
Exactly. Kevin,
No.
Kevin, you took your Einstein pools this morning.
No, I read it yesterday. That's why.
All right. Then you must have gone on Kevin Trudeau's memory course. Either way, compliments of Arthur. Either way, Arthur knows what I'm talking about. Either way, that's exactly spot on in terms of answer. So what's the answer? Is when you say, listen, what can be done about this? I'm terribly sorry. That's like turning around and saying, if we could change Hashem's will, we would. But what can be done about it? It's not in our power. So it's good on one level because it's acknowledging Hashem's power. But on the downside, it's saying, well, look, if we could do something about it, we would have our own decision and we'd keep her alive, which is not what Hashem wanted. What are you going to say, Kev? With pleasure.
But how do they know what? Maybe they were being sincere and genuine and offering condolences. How does it know that that's what they intended? They actually felt that it was what Hashem decided wasn't good. I didn't see anything about that. How is that deduced?
All right. So, for example, the Nimukei Yosef says that what the problem is that your wording itself teaches about your mindset. So if there was something that could be done, they would do it and negate Hashem's will. Meaning that's what the statement implies, even if they were just using it to console him. The right sort of wording, you can't say in this generation, listen, Hashem wanted your daughter dead. You can't say that either, because that's a little bit hectic. Do you agree, Gav?
Hectic in any generation. But
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah. But the thing of it is, today you can't give people Musar, because as Rav Simcha Steiner said, they're so egotistical, they take it badly. And you can't say to them, look, it's Hashem's will, it's meant to be a right. You're meant to just go to a mourner and say, we comfort you among the house of Zion, etc. Arthur, take that thing and stick it.
You also have a cat there that does it, so don't come talk to me about your cat, okay? He's like the guy that calls the kettle black, doing the same thing, but...
The pot.
Yeah, whatever.
I think throw them both out the window. What floor are you on, Arthur?
Third floor.
So both.
Listen, I tried to throw mine out, but it's on the first floor. It just doesn't work.
He's on yours is on the ground floor. His is on the first floor.
Yeah, Arthur, yours might be more successful.
My cat fell out the other day, by the way. It fell off the air conditioner, landed on the lines below. Had to go get it from my neighbor. He actually caught on.
Unlucky. Maybe next time. All right.
That was Ganef. Ganef is a lucky cat, the thief.
So let's.
Use one of its hind laugh, eh?
So Kevin, what Rav Ulla was critical of is that certain wording carries a certain mindset. That's what the Nimukei Yosef turns around and says. Is if you say, well, look, what can be done about it? It's one thing to say, look, it was Hashem's will. We wish you sorry for your loss. Or you don't even say anything like that and just say, we comfort you among the mourners of Jerusalem. But the minute you say, well, what can be done? It means that you're irritated by the outcome, which means you don't trust Hashem's, what do you call it, unfolding of events. So in it, on people on the level that they were, these were big people, considered it not an appropriate thing to say, okay? Because Ulla protested that the words used by the Babylonians give the impression that God did not act righteously in causing the person to die. So this constitutes blasphemy, for it's a principle of Jewish faith that God is righteous in all his ways and always acts with perfect justice. This is in the Yam Shal Shlomo, okay? But of course, Kevin's right. This wasn't the intent of the rabbis. They just simply wished to keep the bereaved from succumbing to melancholy and depression. So they therefore said, what can be done? Meaning that no amount of weeping and mourning will bring the deceased back to life, so it's best not to be marred too deeply by the sorrow, or just comforting him. So we see from this incident that to oppose God's will is considered blasphemy, especially when you're on that level. Instead, a person must accept his decree, good or bad, with love. Okay, and this is the Mishnah in Brochos 54a, which says a person is obligated to bless Hashem for the bad, just as he blesses Hashem for the good. Okay, so based on this particular fact, Ulla was kind of troubled by this, so he actually decided to go to Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda alone, just to try and see if he could comfort him. And Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda said, the verse states, and Hashem said to me, meaning not to Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda, the verse says to Moshe Rabbeinu. And where's the verse found? Guys, it's in Deuteronomy chapter 2, verse 9. And what the verse actually says is, and Hashem said to Moshe, do not oppress Moab and do not incite war against them. Now, what does this mean? Why would he quote this? Why would he quote this? It seems a little peculiar. Okay, because the Torah relates, if you look at Numbers chapter 22, that upon observing Israel's victory of the Amorites, the nation of Moab became frightened. They sent for the elders of Midian and asked their advice on how to defeat Israel. Their talks led Moab to hire the Midianite prophet Bilam to curse the Jewish people. Okay? And God intervened, and Bilam's curse went obviously didn't exist. So what happened then, you remember from the Chumash, is Bilam cooked up a plan. What plan did he cook up, guys?
For the Jewish Moabite woman to seduce the Jewish men.
Excellent. So that's in Numbers chapter 25, verse 1. So the effort succeeded and brought about the death of 24,000 Jews. So the Midianites too sent women to participate in the seduction. However, the primary mover in these events was Moab. Midian played only a secondary role. So what we're going to say is what the heaven does this have to do with what do you call it? What does this have to do with the death? Does that make sense? Gav?
With the consolation of the...
Exactly. So we're saying, okay, so hang on a second. Rav Ulla goes to this great Rov, and this great Rov actually quotes him a particular pasuk. And when he quotes him this pasuk, Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda, he says, and Hashem said to Moshe, do not oppress Moab and do not incite war against them. Okay, so what's the story here? Why would Moshe, in other words, why was it Moshe's thought to wage war against Moab without Hashem's permission? We're gonna get back to why he mentioned this about the loss of his daughter. But why do you think Moshe, because you guys did this on Shabbos, thought to wage war against Moab without Hashem's permission?
To avenge the plan of Bilam, or to avenge the plan that was carried out, that the Jewish men succumbed to the seduction and.
Exactly. So basically, why Moshe might have thought that it made sense to wage war against Moab was very simple. Is the Moabite women were look, although the Midianites got involved with this issue, Midian actually played a subordinate role. Does that make sense? So, all right, I'm just trying to think how to summarize it to be easy. All right, so basically, if it was in Moshe's thoughts to wage war against Moab without Hashem's permission, maybe he reasoned to himself by means of a kol v'chomer. If regarding the Midianites, who came to war against Israel only to assist Moab, the Torah states oppress the Midianites and smite them. So in other words, Moab just came to assist the Midianites. How did they assist them, Kevin?
No, I can't remember. To assist, how did they assist the Midianites? I can't remember.
Okay. So basically, in the 22nd chapter of Numbers, they saw Israel having one victory over another. So eventually, when it came to the Amorites, they were right next door. So the nation of Moab then became very scared. So then they sent for the elders of Midian and asked their advice on how to defeat Eretz Israel. So that's what caused the Moab to hire the Midianite prophet Bilam to curse the Jews. God intervened, and obviously the curse came to nothing, but the Moabites were the ones that sent out their woman, okay? But they did so because they were kind of frightened, and they sought help from the Midianites. But because the Midianites also sent women to participate in the seduction. I don't know if you know this, guys.
Oh, I didn't know.
No, not that. But Yitro was from Midian also, which is quite weird. That Yitro originated from the Jethro, Moshe's father-in-law.
Exactly. So even though the primary mover here was Moab, Midian played a secondary role. So we always think it's only the Moabite woman that went to go and entice the Jewish people. But the Midianites also sent women to assist in the seduction. So
maybe they sent ugly women. That's why it's not as serious.
So Numbers chapter 25, verse 17, the verse goes on to say that the punishment for the role the Midianites played in luring Jewish men to immorality and idolatry, it goes through all the punishments, etc. So when Israel went to war against Midian to avenge the sins, we see that although Midian played a subordinate role in these events, they were severely punished. So this is how the Kol V'chomer works, is if the Midianites only came to assist Moab, okay, because the Midianites reckoned that two forces are better than one. If Moab gets defeated, who do you think's next? Midian. So Midian said that they'd go and assist Moab. But Moab started this whole thing with hiring Bilam and then motivating Midian. And the Midianites sent their women only just to basically have a final remedy of protection. But they were severely, severely punished. So the Kol V'chomer that Moshe could have had is that if we were allowed to avenge the sin and kill the Midianites and oppress them, etc., why couldn't we do it for Moab? Even though I haven't had a divine instruction, because they're even more to blame. They're even more to blame. What's your...
But Moab, Mashiach originated from Ruth, who was a Moabite.
Exactly. So we're going to get to there in terms of...
Maybe that's an Akarat Tov that was foreseen in the future. And the two kids, who had the kids with the Moabites, the tribe came from incestuous unions with two daughters of
Lot.
Of Lot.
Yeah,
and one of them
correct.
One of them was Sanua and didn't call him Moab. The other, he called Amnon, which was no direct correlation to the act
itself. Excellent.
So that was like a reward. Also, one had to be cognizant of that, not to punish them. I think.
Excellent. So we're going to see how this relates to the consolation that Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda gives to Ulla. Okay, it's exactly right. So basically, if Midian played a lesser role and was severely smashed up and punished, Moshe could have reasoned without needing permission from Hashem that the ones that actually instigated it, Moab, deserved even as much punishment, if not more. So exactly that. So why did Moshe not actually go ahead and do this sort of destruction? So basically, Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda is coaxing Ulla to give the answer because he wants to give him, a certain amount of closure on his issue. So it was more of that on Bilam's advice conceived the plan to seduce the Jewish men, and it was Moab that hired Bilam. That's according to Rashi. Midian played a secondary role, so logic dictates that if Midian deserves punishment, Moab certainly does. That's Rashi's commentary to Numbers chapter 31, verse 2. For a teaching that implies the opposite, that Midian was more deserving of punishment than Moab, there's also a discussion by the Ramban in Numbers chapter 25, verse 18. But let's just go on Rashi. So Rabbeinu Tam, which was cited in Tosfot in 38a, he demonstrates that the command to oppress and smite Midian came after the command to refrain from war against Moab. Okay? I'm going to just repeat this again, Arthur, because do you know what I've just said now and the implication, or do you want me to repeat it again?
You're on mute, Arthur.
Arthur?
Just repeat it again.
So Rabbeinu Tam demonstrates that the command to oppress and smite Midian came after the command to refrain from war against Moab. So it's impossible then for Moshe to have made this kol v'chomer. Does that make sense or not? Arthur, do you understand what I'm saying?
I'm exhausted. I'm tired. So it's not sinking in. I'm listening. It's just not.
All right, can anybody answer what I'm saying here?
Just repeat it. I was tired, but I'll get it if you repeat it once.
Explain what the kol v'chomer is. I think that's confusing. What is Moshe's kol v'chomer?
Okay, so the kol v'chomer makes sense, but there's a problem with the kol v'chomer. The kol v'chomer reasons as follows: if Midian was smashed to pieces because of their minor role in the enticing of the Jewish men, okay, then surely Moab, that was the major instigator, deserves to be, if not obliterated, to be equally smashed. That's what Moshe could have reasoned. Does that make sense?
He was saving. They were saving Moab because of what Kevin said earlier, which is
but we didn't get to that yet. So we're asking. We're asking. That's not what we're asking. What we're asking is something slightly different. What we're asking is that the kol v'chomer makes sense. Midian, minor instigator, got smashed to pieces. Moab, why would Moshe need the permission? Because they were the major instigator. Before we answer like Kevin, there's a problem with that kol v'chomer. What's the problem that Rabbeinu Taz says, and that Tosfot also brings up, is that the commandment to oppress and smite Midian came after the command to refrain from war against Moab. So if you told first to refrain against Moab, and then you told to smash Midian, you can't go back and think if Midian is got destroyed, almost destroyed because they're a minor party, we can go back and smash Moab, because Hashem already commanded Moshe to refrain from war against Moab. So it's impossible for Moshe to have made this kol v'chomer. So basically Tosfot answers in the Rabbeinu Tam that the Gemara does not mean that Moshe actually reasoned in this manner, but that God knew that Moshe would reason in this manner. That's why God issues the prohibition against attacking Moab first, to forestall Moshe's kol v'chomer. That's exactly why God gave him that instruction first.
Absolutely. Otherwise, it would have been a no-brainer, and they would have done it. They would have destroyed Moab without doubt.
Correct. Exactly what Gavin's saying. So if they would have destroyed Midian because they were a minor player, for the major player, they for sure would have been destroyed. So what Hashem did first was, before Moshe came to that conclusion, by pure logic, he said, don't touch the Moabites. And then afterwards he said, let's go and destroy the Midianites. So then what he did is he circumvented Moshe coming to that conclusion. That's what we're saying. So Rabbeinu Tam adds that although the Gemara quoted God's words to Moshe, they don't represent what God actually said to Moshe, but rather what God said regarding Moshe. In other words, what we're saying is this is just a discussion on Hashem understanding Moshe's mindset. It wasn't a conversation that Moshe had in his head, because it's a kol v'chomer that would have happened had Hashem not circumvented it. That's exactly what he was saying. So then, what's the reason for exactly what Kevin says? And then Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda said to Ula, so what did Hashem say? What was the Almighty's response? So Ula said, the Holy One, blessed is he, said to Moshe, not that which has arisen in your thoughts has arisen in my thought. I do not desire the destruction of Moab, nor of its sister nation Ammon. So what happens is, this is a conversation that Hashem said to Moshe. He said, what's arisen in your head hasn't arisen in my head. Does that make sense? Which is exactly, we're going to find out why. Because he didn't want the destruction of Moab, nor of the sister nation Ammon. For there are 2 fine pigeons that I must first draw forth from them, Ruth the Moabite and Naamah the Ammonite. To ensure the emergence of these future descendants of Moab and Ammon, God forbade Moshe to wage war against these nations. Okay?
So Midianite were actually lower then because they actually had that they weren't worthy of anything to actually save them. There was nothing coming out of them.
Correct. So although they played a minor role, they had nothing worthy in them to save them. That's exactly it. And we're going to come to why Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda mentions this to Ulla and this conversation. But, so Arthur, I don't know if you know, Ruth the Moabite was the progenitor of King David. She was a great-grandmother of King David. Okay, I don't think she was a grandmother. I think she was a great-grandmother. And interestingly enough, Orpah, which was her colleague, was actually the great-grandmother of Goliath. So that conflict went years before, really.
Wow.
Now,
they say Ruth lived a couple of 100 years in order for that to happen.
I believe you.
Possibly about 200 years or something, 250 years, not your normal 100.
I'll check it out. Arthur, do you know who Nama was? Because I didn't know a few years ago.
I don't know many people. I'm just trying to grab the names that are feeling new to me.
Do you know who?
I know the names, but I don't know who they're related to. I've heard of them.
Gavin, who is Nama?
Naamah. Okay, Gavin, do you know? Before I say it, if I'll try.
You try.
So before I say that, so Orpah had a giant contribution to history.
Yeah.
She was the mother of Goliath.
I thought you meant from Oprah Winfrey, and they got her name mixed up. Yeah.
Orpah, not Orca, like a giant whale. So Naamah was the mother of Ruth, I think.
No. That was Naomi. That was Naomi.
Oh, Naomi. Naamah, I don't know. I know.
So I never knew this either. No.
I'm also thinking of Naomi. Naomi was...
Naomi, you're right, yes.
Okay, but it's not. This is Naamah. So Naamah, because Naomi was a Jew. She wasn't an Ammonite. She was a Jew. Okay, that's why Ruth and Orpah followed her. And then when things got too tough, Orpah said, I'm leaving. And she went down the opposite of the straight and narrow.
She didn't join the Jewish people like Ruth.
Correct.
She was Ruth's sister, and she went back to the priesthood.
But Naomi was Jewish. Naamah was an Ammonite. She was the wife of King Shlomo. She was the wife of Solomon. Okay, and Naamah and Solomon had King Rehoboam. Okay, which was a righteous lineage. God spared Ammon and Moab to allow these 2 righteous women to emerge from the nations. So Rashi defines the general term for a young bird. It's brought in Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 11. But it's also used specifically to refer to a young pigeon in Bereshit chapter 15, verse 9. And what does it mean? It means like if you got a pigeon or a dove, something of purity coming about. So Tosfot basically asks, since Ammon didn't instigate the war against Israel, the Kol V'chomer didn't apply to them. They weren't involved with that. Why does the Gemara speak of Naamah, the Ammonite? Tosfot said that indeed the Gemara is concerned only with Ruth the Moabite because Moab deserved to be smashed up. It only mentions Naamah in passing to say that if basically the Ammonites did do something wrong, that they would have been spared for Naamah. Okay? So Tosfot also... so basically, what happens... what happens is obviously they weren't touched. So how does this relate? So Ulla concluded his words of consolation. Now, is this matter not a basis for a Kol V'chomer regarding your daughter? For an account of only 2 fine pigeons, the Holy One, blessed is he, showed mercy to 2 large nations and did not destroy them. Likewise, with regard to my teacher's daughter, had she been righteous and worthy of having righteous descendants emerge from her, how much more certain is it that she would have lived? This was Ulla's condolence to Rabbi Shmuel Bar Yehuda. That is quite hectic, guys. That's very hectic. So his student is saying, look, if you are my righteous teacher and your daughter had been righteous, for sure she would have had descendants that probably. And if she had righteous descendants, she would have lived at least enough time to have progenited them. So what he's basically saying is your daughter wasn't righteous, and she wouldn't have had righteous descendants coming out from her. If even two wicked nations had two righteous descendants, one from each nation was spared, it means your daughter was clearly not righteous, and she wouldn't have had furthermore, she might not have even had righteous children. Otherwise, she would have been spared, even though she wasn't righteous. So this, to me, I really battled with. Why? Because if God grants a life to a whole nation of sinners because of the eventual emergence of a righteous descendant, what he's saying is he'll certainly grant life to a single individual from whom a righteous person will descend. So basically, Ulla's condolence emphasizes the justice of God's decree. It also addresses the sorrow of a father who feels that his child died without fulfilling her purpose in life. So Ulla explained that the girl certainly had none of her potential unrealized. Had it been possible for her to have descendants, God certainly would have allowed her to live. Her death was a sure sign that she already fulfilled all her purpose in this world. So, I don't know, either the Rif and the Rosh don't agree with this interpretation, because you console a mourner that's deemed fit. So even if you say, listen, these things happen, what are we to do? Our thoughts are with you. That's exactly what Kevin is saying. The Rif and the Rosh are saying, listen, it didn't mean that they're unbelievers. They were consoling their teacher. Also, the problem is, how do you tell a woman that his daughter's no good? Or all her descendants will be no good, and his descendants. It's quite difficult because, the Yam Shah Shlomo said it's very difficult to understand why he would cause pain to the bereaved, why he would say something like this. But apparently, this was Ulla's condolence to Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda. So he was basically...
must have been mortified.
Yeah, I don't quite understand how this thing... I don't know, maybe they were holding it at a different level in those days. So all I wanted you to know is that we're going to end off on this note. We're not going to discuss what this issue is, but why is this whole issue coming about? Is we're going to see it's about how we treat Canaanites and what's the result of this historical emergence. But then we're going to leave this for another day. I hope this made sense, guys.
Scott, what time's the show tomorrow?
Tomorrow it's after Ma'ariv, and then on Thursday it's at 3:50.
Let's have a look. Should be okay. 3:50 on Thursday. Tomorrow after Ma'ariv. Okay. Yeah, that's good for me.
Okay. All right, good. Listen, guys, I don't understand. I'm exactly like Kevin. I don't understand when they were just consoling him, how he took it like that and said, well, it's a mindset of a blasphemy. Because I'm sure they didn't mean to imply it. But according to one opinion, your wording reflects your mindset. According to another opinion, the Rif and the Rosh, you say whatever you can to the mourner to put them at ease.
Yeah, you sensitivity. Yeah, not insensitive. Like it came across very insensitive. That.
But it's definitely better to say to a mourner that your daughter or whoever you're mourning reached their full potential. That's why they were taken early, as opposed to saying that there was no potential. There was nothing that could have come out of that child. So I shouldn't accept it.
I agree with Kevin 100%.
Even if it's true.
I agree with Kevin. It is true.
You won't know anyway.
But I think Gavin's wording is perfect. She fulfilled her potential, so that should give you comfort. Gavin's wording is ideal. This wording is saying, listen, she wasn't righteous, and none of her children would be righteous, and none of your descendants would be righteous. So what good was there for her to continue? It's hectic. I don't get it. But
I tell you something. If you told the child that while they were still alive, that there's no future for them, there's nothing, they'll take their own life. There's no point living.
I get that. That's why a lot of people don't commit suicide, because they don't know how horrific their futures are going to be. Okay, on that cheerful note, let's end off the shir.
Yeah.
Why are you speaking for the whole group? All right. Just speak for yourself.
From my heart.
Shame, aren't you exhausted? But we really, really wish you long life. I love you, mate.